Hey, think about this. We've often heard people say, you are an aggregate of the 5 people you hang around the very most. It's probably true. You're also the sum total of the type of language you use, the things you think about, again, with the 5 people you hang around the very most. We all know people who live in yesterday. Everything they talk about is from the past. They talk about when they were their days in high school or perhaps their days in college. And these things are fun, but when they live there and not thinking about what's in the future, their life is somewhat stifled. It usually has something to do as well with their level of income. That when we live in the past, our income seems to stay in the past as well. We also know people who live in the future all the time. They're constantly thinking about what's next. They're brainstorming, they're thinking about what they could do to perhaps to earn more money, but they're thinking about things that will help others, things that will help their family, things they want to do, perhaps a vacation or whatever it might be. But they're always looking ahead. Now, there are people who perhaps they look ahead and they never take responsibility for anything and they never do anything, and that's not positive either. But I'm talking about the people who are constantly looking forward and they do accomplish because they're goal setters and they set things in place to make it happen. These are great people to surround ourselves with. But as I mentioned before, we also will take on their language and we'll take on some of their habits. And I want to address language right now, and I want to think about this for just a minute. How people talk, how they express themselves. You'll see this with families. The children will mimic their parents, and they'll say things that they hear their parents say. And sometimes you'll hear maybe a 7 or 8 year old use some language that you're kind of surprised at. And I'm not talking about foul language. I'm just talking about sometimes they'll use kind of adult language for a 7 or 8 year old, such as their parents might use. I have some grandchildren who do this because their parents talk to them like they're adults, and so they talk back like they're adults. But there are also people who use foul language. There are people who use negative connotations. When they're speaking to people, they speak down to them. And if we're around these people a lot, that begins to rub off on us. We'll feel uneasy if that's not who we want to be. And we need to ask them in a kind way if they could change the way they're talking. I've had several experiences in my professional career where I have had people who have who've requested that others clean their language up because I was present. Let me give you one example of this. Many years ago, when I was in the military, I was at my officer basic course in at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and we were all back of a truck, and we were heading out to the field, and it's all a bunch of young officers, second lieutenants, and we're going out to do some night exercises, and it's just pitch black in the back of this truck. And of course, it's the Army, and so the language isn't as appropriate as would be normal. And as we're going, I'm not saying anything, but all of a sudden, one of the other lieutenants, he says, "Hey, is Felicia in the truck?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm over here." He goes, "Hey, Felicia's here. Clean it up." Now, I never said anything about their language. I never told them to clean it up. I just didn't engage in it. A few years later, when I was on assignment with my unit, we have a training bay where we would do training and we would have our desks and so forth. And I had a training sergeant, he was a great guy. And sometimes some of the language would get a little out of hand. And he would remind them often. He would say, hey, in this office, we don't use that kind of language. This is Lieutenant Felicia's office, which was pretty cool. Again, didn't have to say anything. Now, why was that so? I never said a word. It was just understood. In my business life, I've had many of the same things take place. And sometimes people say things such as, I know you don't like this very much. I don't. I don't, because I don't think it's professional and I don't think it displays excellence in what we're doing. But they'll clean it up. And I appreciate that. We want to be around people who bring out the very best in us. Excellence is what we should be about in everything we do, whether it's our character, our language, the things that we dream of, the things we plan for. And even when we do reminisce, hopefully we're reminiscing about times that were excellent, where we achieved, and if we didn't at that time, we were pursuing it. Just think about it.